Good morning, and you're very welcome to today's Chef Network discussion on promoting positive mental health in a high-performance environment. My name is Ruth Hegarty. I'm your MC for this morning's session, and I'm delighted to welcome you on behalf of Chef Network and our partners BWG Food Service, who support our ongoing Mind Your Mind series. Today's session will last approximately 1 hour. All attendees are automatically on mute throughout the session, but we will have time to take a small number of questions towards the end of the session. So if you would like to submit a question, you can do so at any time throughout the discussion by putting it into the question panel that you will see in your toolbar. And you can just keep those coming in throughout, and we'll get to a few of them at the end. Shortly, we're going to meet our two speakers, Wade Murphy and Alan Quinlan, but before we introduce them, I want to introduce Ricky O'Brien from BWG Food Service, who is supporting this event, to say a few words of welcome. Thanks, Ricky.
Apologies, Ruth, I had IT difficulties. But good morning all, and thanks everyone for logging in. On behalf of me, Ricky O'Brien, and all my colleagues in BWG Food Service, I want to say how honoured we are to be part of another Mind Your Mind webinar. I'm also really looking forward to hearing from Alan Quinlan and Wade Murphy. And look, you didn't come here to hear from me, so I'll pass you back to Ruth. And again, thank you to Chefs Network. And on behalf of all my colleagues in BWG Food Service, we're delighted to be part of this Mind Your Mind webinar again. So good luck, Alan and Wade, and back over to you, Ruth. Thank you all.
Short and sweet, Ricky, the way we like it. Thanks a million, and thank you very much for supporting this. As you said earlier, really important conversation for the industry, and I know something that you feel very strongly about supporting. So we do appreciate the support. So I'd like to invite Alan and Wade now to join us. We're turning it on their cameras. And thanks. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey, how are you? Good morning. That was a bit
delighted
scary, a bit technical.
Yeah, we're there now. Everyone can hopefully see us and hear us anyway, so that's the first step. So absolutely delighted to welcome Wade Murphy, who's the chef and co-proprietor with his wife Elaine of 1826 Adare restaurant in Adare, County Limerick, and Alan Quinlan, who I'm sure many, if not all of you, will be familiar with as a former Munster and Ireland international rugby player. Alan, thank you also for joining us this morning. And I know we've got loads to discuss and we've only got an hour, so let's jump right in. It's just, you know, as I said, it's such a hugely important topic, and Alan, you know, it's something that, like, at this stage you've been talking about for quite a while, probably before it became fashionable to talk about mental health. So I suppose, just to kind of start us off, if you maybe give us a little bit of your story and the background as to, so the struggles you've had with mental health, which you've been quite open about and you've talked about a lot in the media, and how you kind of came on this journey and have become really a mental health advocate.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, it's kind of strange when, number one, speaking into a computer. It's sometimes it's more meaningful and easier to talk to people that are in front of you. But this is where we are at the moment. It's been an unprecedented time. Ever before COVID, I think we have you know, mental health problems and issues, and the stats and facts show that in Ireland, not just in with chefs, with sports people, with everybody. I think 1 in 4 people will be affected at some stage of their lives. Now that may be big or small, but the stats and the facts back that up. COVID has been very, very difficult. The social interactions, normality in life that we call it, has knocked a lot of people off track. And it's like going back to school after a long holiday. It takes time to readjust, and our minds, I think we experience the world through our minds, and so keeping our mind as healthy as possible is can make a really big difference to the way we view the world. So for me, I grew up in Tipperary. I had no idea or understanding what good mental health was growing up. There was no education. It was never mentioned in school. It was never mentioned in sport. So I didn't really have any understanding of what mental health was or how it would affect me. I just thought you just get on with things, move on, toughen up. But from a very young age, I would have struggled a lot with anxiety. And some of us are more warriors than others, and that's fine too. But my anxiety started to increase the older I got, with exams, different sorts of pressure in sport, worrying about my future, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of knew there was some sort of a nervous disposition or something there, extra anxiety. I was envious of some of my friends. They were very relaxed and calm, and took the world as it came, whereas maybe it was something inside me that kind of wanted me to drive me on and to do better in life. But a high level of anxiety, I would say, which I didn't really understand. My impression growing up of a mental health problem, or if somebody said, well, somebody down the road has mental health issues, my impression would have been madhouse, straitjacket, and that's it. Which was my ignorance, my lack of understanding and education. But I kind of lived through that in my teenage years, where I was very anxious, which would make me feel unwell, sad, negative, all that kind of stuff. And I just put all my time, energy, and resources into hiding that emotional imbalance, I call it. Again, not knowing what it was, but if you can't see the problem, you can't go to your parents or your coaches or your teachers and say, I don't feel well in myself. My impression was that you have to be tough, strong, resilient, and show no weakness. But it's so important to understand ourselves and get that balance right in our minds. As I said, we view the world through our minds. So I kind of had that situation. I left school at 16. I qualified as a mechanic. I started playing professional rugby when I was 21. I was living the dream. But in those early years of my professional rugby, I went to my doctor at one stage and I said, I didn't, again, lack of understanding or not really knowing what I was saying. I went to my doctor with the Irish rugby team and I said, I think I'm depressed, I feel suicidal. And I knew I shouldn't feel like this. So he put his arm around me, we walked around his hotel room when we were away in camp, and he said, it's just the blues, everyone gets that. So I left this kind of 21, 22-year-old thinking, if I feel like this, I just got to suck it up. It's just the blues. Everyone feels like that. Because I had no real understanding of why I was feeling like this. I should have been living the dream, going to work in a tracksuit. I wasn't putting on the overalls anymore. I was good at sport. I was starting to excel in my sport. So I was frustrated and angry that I wasn't feeling well in myself, and I didn't know why. So from that age on, kind of late teenage years and early 20s, I knew that there's something there that I have to hide because nobody will understand. And I did. And it wasn't a case of me being depressed all the time. It was just a period here and there. It might only be a day, a couple of hours, a couple of days, bad week, suck it up, get on with it, don't tell anyone. And that was probably the way my life continued right up towards the end of my rugby career, when I got picked in the British and Irish Lions when I was 34, after having a lot of bad injuries and ups and downs and a bit of a roller coaster being a sports person, which is part and parcel of it. And that was the highest I could have went as a sports person, to be picked in the British and Irish Lions. And incredible elation. I went to cloud 9, and very quickly I was through the floor because I got suspended and I missed out on that Lions tour, and it really had a profound effect on me. The reason I tell you this story, some of you maybe rugby fans may be familiar with it, but that was really the catalyst for me to try and get help, to try and make some change, and to try and get stronger and understand myself better, and not fulfill this impression and this situation I've created in my head that I have to be so robust. I can't show any weakness. I'm a strong sports person. I'm athletic. My friends, family look up to me. I am on this pedestal because I come from an area where nobody's playing for Munster, nobody's playing for Ireland. I'm the hero, essentially. I kind of created this narrative in my head that if I feel unwell or sad or depressed in myself, how can I go to people who look up to me and say that? And that's where mental health can be misconstrued, and that's what we want to try and encourage, that people, you know, the father of the family or the mum of the family or the head of the business, we've created a narrative where we say to them, well, you're in a senior position, you can't show any sort of vulnerability. And I had that narrative in my head, and it couldn't be further from the truth. We want everybody to express their vulnerability. And that's what I started to do. I started a process after huge disappointment, and we all have disappointment in life and setbacks. I started a process of thankfully found some little bit of resilience, because I felt like giving up. I felt suicidal. I felt like ending my life. I was really sad and disappointed with the sporting adversity that I just experienced, but also I was sad and frustrated that there was a negative cloud and a dark cloud kind of that would linger in my head, and I didn't really know how to move it. So the older I was getting, the more negative I was getting with myself, and that darkness was kind of increasing and becoming more regular. As I said, thankfully, with the help of some close family and friends, I went to my doctor, rugby doctor again, and immediately he showed empathy and compassion, which was an incredible relief, because I was so nervous about after the first experience. And I don't hold anything against the first doctor. That was probably in the mid to late 90s, and that was even the stigma around our medical profession. So I started a process then of opening up and speaking about all these feelings and negative voice in my head, and how I was feeling, and the way I viewed the world, and, you know, what was there any sort of light at the end of the tunnel, which was crazy because I was in a great position and I couldn't see all that. So I started a process, and it was a big relief. And if we experience any sort of pain, even if people can't see it, it's your pain. It's internal pain sometimes, and there might be no apparent reason that it's there. We don't know how to shift it, and that's a very common attribute for people with depression or mental health problem. They're confused, frustrated, and they don't know how to move it. So that it was a similar situation for me. I had achieved so many wonderful things in life, had so many good things going on, but there was a lot of negative there. I didn't see all the positive things that were happening, that had happened. So I needed to speak about that, and I needed intervention. I was very nervous about that, and I kept it very quiet at the start, which can be a big attributor to people not getting help and not seeking support, because they're fearful of how they'll be judged. So I started a process with my doctor, which was it was like a weight off my shoulders. I can actually take off the mask now. I'm not this strong, resilient rugby player. I'm just a normal human being has had struggles. Not really sure why. Maybe it was genetic. And then I started a process of going to a psychologist and trying to open up and understand myself, and trying to be happy again, and try and control my happiness, because none of us are going to be happy every day of our lives. And I understand that, and I understand it more so now. But it's just trying to find a little bit of joy and happiness in the simple things we do. And there was so many good things happening in my life, had happened in my life, and I was trying to appreciate them more and get a better balance of my emotional well-being. And I started a process with a psychologist. Sometimes that's talking, and it was the talking really that started that process for me, that I had to figure things out. And one of the things that the most important thing the psychologist said to me at the start, he said, your mind is full of clouds for obvious reasons. I've just gone through adversity with the really disappointing sporting situation. But your mind is full of clouds at the moment. He says, I'm going to help you remove the clouds and let the sunlight in. So in trying to give a summary of where I'm at, nothing has drastically changed for me in my life where I'm now, only that I've learned to move the clouds and let the sunlight in myself. And that's why it's a very important topic and subject to have these conversations and try and educate ourselves, but also our children, our staff, people in the community who are healthy and well, that unfortunately, sometimes the clouds come in and we can't control them, and we need to learn how to open those clouds and let the sunlight in, because there's loads of sunlight there in the world. And sometimes things seem like they are the end of the world, and I felt like that. I felt I'd achieved nothing, and this is my legacy at the end of my rugby career, where I've done so many good things, played for Ireland, played for Munster, won European Cups, and now I'm going to be defined by an incident that was very high profile, and to this day it still eats me up and frustrates me and upsets me, but I've learned to deal with that. So that's kind of as quick as I can tell my story. So in summary, I've always had a certain level of anxiety that I couldn't really control. That anxiety made me sad and depressed sometimes, and you know, coming towards the end of my rugby career, I hit this point where it was getting serious, and I got intervention and spoke about it, and I've learned the tools, and we can share some of them in the next little while.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose we definitely kind of want to get into what that process that you went through was, and as you said, particularly the tools. But I mean, it is kind of that vicious circle, isn't it? That's the big issue around kind of having the anxiety and then not being able to kind of enjoy your successes, and then wondering why you can't enjoy them, and that kind of brings you down even further.
Yeah, it does, and that's probably a very common thing. So in that, you know, doing that process of going to my doctor, and I probably would say this a couple of times, compassion and empathy from people who are healthy and well is a very important piece for people who have struggled or are struggling, because it takes away that fear and it normalizes things a little bit. I'm sure Wade will say the same. I'm very open now, talking with family and friends, that I am this strong rugby player who would kill you to win a rugby match. And there's a difference in that, between that kind of strength and tenacity, as opposed to, you know, your own personal emotional well-being. I know lots of strong sports people who are incredibly powerful, and we view them in that way, that they're very powerful and strong, but we're all human beings. We all have those emotions to deal with, and some of us deal with them differently. So it's kind of important that we have these conversations and figure out triggers, things that make us sad, things that stress us a little bit, and things that we like doing and enjoy doing, and trying to be a bit more present in the here and now. The reality of life is there's always going to be pressure. There's always going to be performance for that match, performance in the kitchen for the chef, performance for the business person, whatever the case may be. But it's how we deal with that pressure and how we let it affect us. And I like this word, and it's a very common word, but what's our perspective, and where that perspective is, and understanding that if we need some help and support and things are going a little bit awry, to have a conversation and talk to someone and get the help, and then educate yourself. So it's sometimes we need help. We need the horse to be brought to water, but we've got to drink ourselves, and that's where the education piece is for our next generation of children coming through, and people who are, you know, adults as well. I know lots of older people who have kind of carried a certain amount of stress and pressure, and they want to release that, and it's really fulfilling when you can do that. It doesn't make life better. You don't press a switch and life is suddenly going to be brilliant, because sometimes people's reality is difficult, really difficult, and they're very entitled to be sad and depressed. But I still believe, and I believe I'm really heartened by what's happened in Ireland the last 10 years, that there is more compassion shown, there is more education, and there is a will and a desire to create light at the end of the tunnel and offer that support to people. So that's really good.
Great, thank you, Alan. Wade, I want to come to you now, and
how do you follow that?
I was going to say, you're maybe not quite as used to talking about this as Alan has, I think, been nearly a decade now kind of talking about this, and it's amazing, I think, at the time that Alan really started to kind of come out and talk about this, that he did, and mental health was kind of talked about an awful lot less at that time. But so I suppose for you, this is something a bit more recent that you've been kind of the journey that you've been on, but can you kind of tell us a little bit about, I suppose, when you started to realize that you were struggling with your mental health?
Still on that journey. It's how can you follow like what Alan said there, you can go back and look at everything, but it's a day-to-day thing, and you're not, if you do have any issues, and just because you do talk, you're not cured. You know, it's an ongoing thing. And even just recently, very recently, a lot of the things that we'll talk about, which that Alan mentioned there, you know, about tools to do and trying to maintain, you know, when they slip and you see them, like, and we all know what our industry is like at the moment. It's crazy. Everybody's short-staffed, everybody's busy, and things get put away and get left to the side, and what you used to do, and then the, you know, the monkey brain starts to come back in, and things like that. And that's happened recently as well. So, you know, just, I'm no expert, and, you know, I'm quite happy to talk about it, but like very similar to Alan, and you know, grew up in Gorey, from Gorey in County Wexford, and, you know, great family, great background and everything like that. But there was always, like Alan, there was always something there, always a pressure to perform, always I think a school teacher told me I'll never be nothing, I'll just be standing on street corners in Gorey one time. And so that kind of didn't help. While it was something to try G me up, it didn't help in the back of the mind. So, you know, there was always something there. As I said, driven, wanted a better life. But like, you know, I'm very, very lucky to have the career I've had. I've worked all over the world. You know, worked with some great people. I've made some great friends within this industry. I've learned a lot. But when I look back on things, you always have to question, did I go traveling for work, or was I running away from my issues? You know, and so there was kind of a bit of that going on as well, you know. So but no, yeah, so we all know we're going through COVID at the moment. Myself and Elaine opened our own business 8-9 years ago. It was always a dream. It's been very, very successful. The restaurant has, you know, been way beyond what we ever hoped to achieve. And with that itself comes its own pressures and its own, you know, in its own, well, it's great. And then like what Alan touched on there, you know, you could be picking up awards or winning European Cups and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, there's something there at the back of the head that you know, you're never happy with that, and there's something eating away at you or whatever, you know. It's kind of, I heard somebody say one time, I was born disappointment and it got worse every day after that. I was born disappointed and it got worse every day after that, you know. So it's kind of things like that go on. So with COVID, with everything like that, and, you know, I'm not making any blame, but with COVID and everything like that, and the shutting down of the restaurant and not being in control, everything out of your hands, you know, if you're closing the restaurant because you ran a bad business or something like that, you could hold your hands up and say, yeah, that's, you know, that's what happened. But with that, and then, you know, we all thought, in the beginning of all these lockdowns, we were like, oh geez, great, this is great, all this time off, never had it in years, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But then things start coming to the fore, and things start rearing their head. So I kind of, you know, I knew I wasn't feeling well, for want of a better word. I knew there was something niggling at me. So unfortunately, like out of adversity, things like my family set up an organization, a foundation in Wexford, which is a suicide prevention organization called Talk to Tom. And my uncle, who's the CEO, goes around the country now doing the CPR training, and trains all the, you know, even the guys that are on the Shannon watch, he does trains all that. So, you know, eventually I just said, right, there's something not right here. So I rang my uncle Ray, and I had a chat with him. And thankfully they had the resources, you know, the counsellors there to put me, you know. So I started talking, and, you know, kind of, I can go on about what happened with me, but the key thing was the talking. And, you know, it was like you released a pressure valve in my head. Like it didn't fix anything, but it was about the talking and stuff like that. So the people I was talking to, and the counsellors, and even like Alan, rang my GP and my doctor, explained what was going on. And so, you know, they started giving me advice and things to do, and everything like that. So I started to introduce these things. Like, but as I said, this is all in COVID. We were all going for our 5K walks, you know, when we were, whatever, our 2K walks, or doing our laps and all this kind of stuff. So it was great because there was no, you weren't in work 15, 16 hours a day. You weren't doing whatever. So, you know, you could practice those things. But like, it's fun, like the stigma thing, like that Alan kind of touched on earlier on, and what Alan, like there was all that, like you know, even with myself, it was like I can't tell anybody I'm not feeling well. Like I'm on telly, I do this, I run my own restaurant, you know. So there was all that stigma, and even going back to when I was a young fella in Gorey, and we talk about mental health, it wasn't brought up. But like if you saw somebody and you said to, you know, somebody, oh, there's Johnny, yeah, oh yeah, his nerves are not right. You know, that was the answer that, you know, that was what people would say and stuff like that. But you never, but thankfully, you know, we are starting to talk about it. It is getting prominent. And one of the things that kind of I've noticed is since I started this journey, and like I said, it's a continuing journey. There's good days, there's bad days. You know, you don't always do the right thing. So I'm not on here saying that, you know, I've perfected this, or I've done, like, because far from it, and it's a continuing thing. But you know, like even I have a 3-year-old little boy. He started preschool, and now on a Monday, for 1 hour every Monday, they're doing mindfulness and breathing, and the girl that runs the preschool had written a book about you know, mindfulness for children and stuff like that. That was never done when we were growing up. Like there was none of that. There was no mind in your mind. There was no, you know, like Alan said, you bottled it all in. You didn't show any weaknesses, and the same for me. But so kind of, yeah, I've started doing a load of different things, cutting out alcohol, trying to manage my stress. Doesn't always work. Being back in the restaurant now again, you know, trying to do something I enjoy. So kind of, yeah, look, my journey has been a long journey. It's probably been a journey of running away from what was going on in my head a lot. But I finally just said, look, enough's enough. I need to talk. So luckily enough,
Wait, can I like ask you, and it's insofar as you're kind of happy to talk about it, I suppose, like as you said, maybe over the years there was things like, you know, maybe always kind of feeling your success wasn't good enough or whatever. But what do you think kind of really got you to the point where you said, okay, I need to talk to somebody? I suppose what were the, like, how were you feeling? What point did
yeah,
you
sitting at home during lockdown and stuff like that, and you know, we were all doing our Zoom quizzes and all, you know, having our bottles of wine or beer or any of this kind of stuff. So, but like you know, Rian, as I said, he's only 3. The restaurant was going well. I just knew myself, I'd a lot to be thankful for, but I wasn't thankful for it. And you know, and I wasn't enjoying things, and I wasn't enjoying, you know, I wasn't enjoying life. Like I wasn't contemplating suicide or anything like that. Thankfully, not yet, as they say. But I just wasn't enjoying life, so I just needed to talk to somebody, and I just knew that, and that's what kind of set it off. And you know, going back to what Alan had said there earlier on, it wasn't COVID or it wasn't the restaurant shutting down that caused this. This was always something niggling away, but it triggered it. It finally got to a point where it was kind of, you know, you're sitting there and you've so much to be thankful for, but you're just having a dark day and you can't understand why, you know. And it's like I said, I'm no expert, but just knew that something had to be done. I just had to do something, you know.
Yeah. And I think a lot of chefs and probably people across lots of different industries that shut down, you know, with COVID, I think they just probably struggled with not being busy and not being constantly distracted and actually having kind of time to look inside and have to kind of face.
Yeah, see the real things that are going on, because you kept yourself, I know I kept myself really busy for all those years to try, probably, you know, if anything was, I said, oh, I'll throw myself into work now for the day and then I'll forget about this, or this won't bother me, you know. And there's probably a lot of that goes on, and I'm sure it does go on within the industry and loads of different industries. So, but look, mine was niggling away there for years, and COVID just kind of, the lockdown and that just triggered it, you know. And
well, I suppose that kind of brings me on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, I suppose, which is the environment that, you know, that you work in, and that Alan, that you were in, which is, you know, they're both, I mean, obviously very different worlds, but both worlds that are, you know, where kind of you're expected to perform at a very high level, and there's unavoidably pressure, you know, and there's lots of highs and lows as well, I think, in both. And like, I suppose just to stay with you for a minute, Wade, on that, I mean, do you think that there's things that are just inherent in that environment that create negative mental health impacts?
Absolutely, yeah. There's, you know, whilst our industry is changing a lot, and even things like this it's fantastic, you know, and there's people like yourselves and stuff that really trying to change what goes on in the industry. But yeah, there is a high pressure to perform. There is a high, you know, no different to Alan, but you know, it is a high pressure environment. Unfortunately, it is like, and there's the guest expectations, there's, you know, your boss's expectations, there's your own expectations, which are probably too, you know, you set the goal so high for yourself, and things like that. So yeah, absolutely, like you're kind of pushing yourself, and you're meant, I like to, chefs would you know, take more care of a 70 euro piece of meat than they would their own mind. You know, they'd spend more time looking after that than you would, you know, focusing on your own mind. And you know, to me, not looking after your mind, and to use it like a chef's analogy, it's like you go to work and you get all this stuff ready for a lovely stock or whatever like that, and you carefully roast your bones, you carefully do your vegetables, you put them all into a pot, and then you just turn it on and boil and walk away, you know, and the stock is full of fat and cloudy and blah blah, but you did all this work to get it ready, and then, you know, you just leave it boil away there. So not looking after your mind is very similar to that. You know, if you don't look after it, you only have one, and it will be cloudy, and it will be, you know, you will do that. But yeah, the restaurant industry, and you know, the whole, and whether it's, you know, fine dining or casual restaurants or anything like that, there is an awful lot of pressure. We put it on ourselves, customers put it on us, the fear of that bad review, the fear of whatever, you know, like that famous the madness of Michelin, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, like you can just look back on all the different stories of chefs who, you know, who unfortunately didn't make it in the end, with, you know, and things happen, and the pressure of everything. But there's the long hours, there's the pressure and everything like that. And you know, like I said, the industry is trying to change, and you know, it's not going to change overnight. And there is that kind of a machoism within kitchens, and that you know, that butchness, not that butchness, but that bravado, and I'm the best in the kitchen, and you know, nothing's going to bother me, I'll run this section even if I have 150 people coming in, you know. And there is that. But like, I always think, you know, you don't know what that person is doing when they're going home at night. You know, you don't know what's going through their head, whether they're the best person in the kitchen. You meet somebody on the bus, you don't know what's going on in here, and we don't talk about it. And it's very simple, you know, we really don't talk about it, and really don't say, you know, there's this thing like it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay not to do anything about it, you know. So I think you've frozen there, Ruth, have you? Oh, you're back.
Alan, can I come back to you? I mean, in professional rugby, did that, you know, exacerbate the issues that you had, or do you think, you know, wherever you would have maybe gone in life, that would have caught up with you?
No, I think it was something that was lingering there, and I think it's important. And I'm sure Wade, I'd certainly say this, but I'm sure Wade would probably agree. We don't want to encourage people not to be professional rugby players and not to be chefs because they're going to get depressed. That's not the case. It's usually an individual thing. I had friends of mine who played for 15 years with me, went on an incredible journey where we came from nobodies to winning European Cups and all that stuff. Really fulfilling journey, hard journey, ups and downs. And that's life. We all have ups and downs. We all have stresses, pressures, but it's how the individual can deal with them. Some of my teammates just so laid back, no stress, no pressure. I'm in the toilets before a game in the south of France, and I'm empty reaching before a game. Could I control that better? Absolutely. The world is changing. You know, Wade mentioned reviews as well there. it's the same in sport. Everybody has an opinion now. Social media, everybody can say nasty things. They can affect us in different ways. So I think every environment, Ruth, is there's pressure to perform. Of course, there's some jobs, and this is just reality, that, and I mean this respectfully, that people go to, they can clock in at 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 or half 5 in the evening, and their job stays there. They've done their tasks throughout that day and they don't take it. When you're in your own individual business, or you're a sole trader, and effectively I was a sole trader, because if I don't perform, if my business, the Alan Quinlan sports person, doesn't perform, he gets cut and he doesn't get a contract next year. So there's certain pressures that are different, of course. But I've said this to lots of people, I wouldn't discourage my own son, friends or other kids for not having a go, because they're all learning experiences. And what we want to try and do in any environment is create preventative measures. So in other words, this resilience that I had as a rugby player, where I would never give up, I'd make a tackle, get back up, make a tackle to exhaustion. I had that kind of fight and desire in me. We all have that fight and desireness to not give up. But it's just getting those clouds clear in the mind. And then if your mind is healthy and fairly okay, it doesn't matter. All these stresses are not stresses, because they're just challenges and tasks that we get through. But it's very difficult to kind of get through situations if you're pulling a big weight behind you. And that's the way it feels like having depression or a mental health problem, that you're pulling a weight that makes it more difficult to get through the problem. If I wake up this morning, my mind is clear and my head is good, I can stay going for a 12-hour shift, doing anything. I could dig a trench from here to, you know, Dublin to Tipperary, and it's a fulfilling day. Of course, I'm physically tired, but I'm mentally fulfilled. So it's about finding that fulfillment in your own mind. So I'm always very wary of saying, oh God, don't play professional sport, because it's too much pressure. You lose the match, you lose your contract. That's just part of life. We teach it to our children playing sport. You have to win and lose, and life is part of that. But I think, so for me, the question was, did it exasperate it? On occasions, certain things did, like major disappointments, like being suspended for a line sore. Was I depressed and sad when I dislocated my shoulder in Australia in 2003 at a World Cup? Absolutely, I was devastated. I'd worked for years to try and get to that World Cup. I was now a starting player. I now score a try in one of the biggest games against Argentina. I dislocate my shoulder. That's my World Cup in tatters straight away. Am I devastated? Of course. Am I depressed about it? No. I'm heartbroken and sad. So there's a separation point there. And again, in my journey and having conversations with people, and I have chefs who are friends of mine, and I understand those pressures, not to the same extent, but in any environment, there's going to be pressure. Good mental health is how you can deal and process those pressures. The pressure doesn't go away when you become aware of your mental health, but by changing our behavior sometimes, trying to work on our mindset, getting help in doing that, we can now take on the task or the challenge in a much more robust, energetic, and positive way. We can now dissect our perspective after the loss and say, it's not the end of the world, because it's not. You know, the restaurant will there be after Chef, after Wade, the match, Munster Rugby is still there after me. So life moves on. And it's about getting that bit of fulfillment, enjoyment, and making yourself as good as you can be. There's no such thing as perfection with life. So yeah, there's pressures there, and sometimes I reveled in that challenge of being in the south of France with my back to the wall, which is incredible, because there's two kind of separate Alan Quinlans here. Like I say, that sports person who did something naturally that he loved. I had a desire and a drive to be out there, and the elation and the buzz out of 85,000 people, you know, playing in that environment, and that trigger is incredible. That's something that I'll never forget, and that adrenaline rush. Would I decide oh God, I shouldn't do that because I'm on a pedestal and I could make a mistake and it could make me depressed. No, you can't do that. But I think what we need to do is, and this is really important around the educational piece, which really enthuses me, is preventative measures. Educate our children, educate us as adults, learn more, learn the triggers, understand. And even when you do all that, you still could have a day where you're depressed, but then you can have a conversation and you know that maybe I'll go for a walk. Maybe I need to take a day off. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to go for a bath, read a book. And it's about getting into those kind of habits. And like I say, there's no perfect solution here, but it's a much better situation that if we can encourage people to open up. Most of the chefs, most of the rugby players, and most of the people who are depressed know actually that they're kind of in this bad, negative place, and that sometimes their behaviors are adding to that, like alcohol, like lack of sleep, like lack of exercise, like negative self-analysis. You know, and sometimes it's about being able to stop in your mind and process it. You know, I said this to someone literally last night. If we have, like, there's a situation in school where there's sport and there's challenges with kids, our kids starting school, the two of us are dads in the same school, and like we could easily pick 5 or 6 negative things about the books. The bag is too heavy, there's too many books, they've had to do iPad learning this year, that was an extra cost, they're doing way too much sport, they're tired. And suddenly you pick 5, 6, 7 negative things. And I said to him, if we dwell on all those negative things and talk about them, well, we're going to translate that negativity into our children. So it is what it is. These things will fall into place. And sometimes things do fall into place. But it's about, and I do understand, when those clouds are in there, it's very hard. You can't process this stuff. So the key to all this for me is being able to remove the clouds, understand that I'm not feeling well and that there's some sort of pressure there, and then figuring out who do I need to talk to or what do I need to do as an individual to make it better.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of add into what Alan just said there, like, and one of the things that's kind of annoys me about it and stuff like that, and exactly what he was just saying there now, is like, you know, people spend more time, and excuse my French, but pissing and moaning about what facilities and what is not there than they do resourcing what facilities are actually there for you if you need help. Like, there is a lot there, and I'm not affiliated with anything. I spoke about my family's foundation, but I'm not affiliated with, but there's a lot of help there. So I just wanted to add that to what Alan was saying, like, not jumping across him.
No, thanks, Wade. And I know we have got a handout with, you know, some contacts and organizations that people can contact if they are looking for help, and we will share that and we'll send it out to everyone who has registered. It is already up on our website from the events we did in January. But Wade, I think you we're nodding a lot there. I think you can relate to a lot of what Alan was talking about, and I think a lot of chefs would relate to, like, the feelings he was talking about around the highs and lows of it, and
yeah,
that whole thing of kind of keeping things in perspective is huge, isn't it?
It's huge. Like, and Alan said something there that I really liked, and I was probably nodding away. It's like perfect. Like, we as chefs, we're the worst in the world for looking for that perfect dish, that perfect plate, that perfect service, that, you know. And I hate to burst anybody's bubble out there that's listening to the webinar. There is no perfect. Good enough is good enough, and there is no perfect. Like, and we are very, very critical of ourselves. You know, like what Alan said there, concentrating on the 5 negative things with the school. You know, how many times do chefs do like 100 people for dinner, and there's one complaint, or somebody didn't like something, and that one complaint has ruined the other 99 in your head, you know. And as human beings, we do it a lot, but like, yeah, there is no perfect, and like I said, good enough is good enough. But, and we are so critical of ourselves, like, and you know, what do we do what do chefs in the industry most nights after service, or when you're plating up a dish, if you're doing a new dish and you're doing a tasting, you concentrate on what's not right on it rather than what's right on it, you know, and we do that continuously within the industry and with ourselves. So yeah, that's why I was nodding so much when Alan was talking there, that a lot of it is very, very similar. What he was saying there is very similar to what goes on in our industry and what goes on, you know, in general.
I want to thanks. Louise has shared, just in, you'll see in the handout section of your control panel, she's shared that attachment with the mental health supports. And I just want to remind people, if they do want to submit questions, you can do that in your control panel as well. So guys, we really want to get into then kind of the taking action and the tools, and to stay with you for a minute, Wade. I suppose, like Alan mentioned there when he was talking some of the triggers, can you kind of tell us, I suppose, in your own experience, what some of the triggers are, some of the things to kind of look out for that are like, oh, okay, I need to, you know, I'm kind of going on the wrong, you know, in the wrong direction here in terms of my mental health, and then what do you do to deal with that?
Like I said, no, I'm no expert, and Alan has been doing this a long time, and you know, I'm still in the process of trying to figure things out.
I'm no expert either, Wade. It's really personal experience.
Experiences are so important.
Yeah, and everyone's story is important, and how they share it and what they feel. I think it doesn't matter if I've spoken about this 10 years ago or not. Yeah, everybody's story is important, and it's what you feel. And I meet people on a regular basis who are like that. They're trying to figure it out themselves, and that's vitally important to them.
Yeah, but you know, like, you know, our industry, we you know, like we said, we work hard and we work extremely long hours, and there is, in the early days and stuff like that, there's a lot of partying, there's a lot of going out after work, there's pints after work, there's blah blah blah. And you know, I remember as a young chef in London, working in London, and you go out on a Friday night, and next minute you're going for a couple, and next thing it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're walking in to start your shift for the next day without going to bed and stuff like that, you know. So, you know, these things, and I'm not telling people not to live their lives and not to have fun, but you just need to watch out for it, like everything in balance, you know, things like that. And one of the things I've learned in my journey so far is, you know, the importance of sleep, you know, decent sleep before working, you know, getting out walking and things like that. And if you're not doing them, you will start slipping into, you know, those clouds, as Alan said, will come back. So, you know, it is something that with me, you know, not sleeping enough, drinking too much alcohol, not exercising enough, not paying attention to the present moment, dwelling on the past, things like that. All these kind of things. Yeah, I'm guilty of all of the above, like, and have done them, and sometimes still do them, and need to pull myself. So yeah, there's all that kind of thing. And like I said, I'm not telling people to not enjoy life, but there's certain things you really do need to do to mind your mind, and if you don't do those things, you know, unfortunately, it takes something disastrous or something really bad to happen before we react. But you know, if you try maintain it and try mind your mind as you go along, these things will help. Now, it's not good, like I said earlier, it's not going to cure you, but that's what I found. Like, just, you know,
can you take us through kind of what has worked for you then, and what are the steps? I suppose, are there things that if you really feel you're kind of at that crisis point or things have gotten bad, what are the immediate things you do, and what are the things that you were kind of doing to maintain your mental health on an ongoing basis?
Like I've touched on, like, cutting down or giving up the alcohol, but like people are gonna I'm not getting into a Volkswagen camper van now and heading out to West Clare and doing yoga on the side of the Cliffs of Moher and stuff like that. But exercise, things like Pilates, things like yoga, you know, those kind of things. Trying to get, somebody had said to me, one of the counsellors in Talk to Tom told me that the hours before midnight are the golden hours. So if you can get to bed, you know, early 1 or 2 nights, you know, you're not becoming a bore, you're just finding yourself, you know. Getting to bed early, getting a guaranteed 8 hours sleep. And I actually meditate and listen to meditation tapes. I have an app on my phone that I listen to, and I listen to that at night to send me off to sleep, because as a chef, you know, nighttime is when your head is racing. You've just come back from a busy service, you've got into the car, or you've got on the bus or the train to go home, you're rushing. Then in your head, you're running through the service, you're running through the day. So I just listen to a sleeping app, a sleeping meditation that's a breathing app. I try to do it every night. And like I said, recently, those things were slipping because work was so busy and stuff like that, and it was starting to come back again. And, you know, when you do these things, I find them, you know, I find them, they help me. Like Alan said, it's all personal. It's all so things like Pilates, things like exercise, things like, you know, a little bit of meditation, reading up on stuff like that. You know, normally I have, like my wife Elaine and kill me, I have about 500 cookbooks here. And that's the only reading I used to ever do, was like go upstairs and go, oh, I haven't looked at that one for ages, and bring it down and read it. But actually reading some books and stuff like that. And you know what, I think Alan touched on it as well, like practicing forgiveness and practicing, you know, don't not being so hard on ourselves. Like, you know, if you do make a mistake and you do things wrong or whatever, whether it's in work or personally or anything like that, you know, beat yourself with a feather, not a stick. You know, just be kind to yourself. We're all only human beings. So these are the kind of things that I've touched on, and, you know, and that I found, and thanks to, luckily enough, and thanks to, because I talked, and, you know, talking, it's very simple. You know, it's good to talk, like, and get it. You know, we bottle things up, and it's our nature. It's again going back to the stigma and the things about mental health and not feeling well and not telling anybody and not showing any weaknesses. Like, we're all human beings at the end of the day. So look, I could go on, but that's kind of the stuff that I find, and you know, again, the realizing, and that was a big thing for me. What we touched on it earlier on was the perfectionism, and the realizing that there is no perfect plate, there is no perfect dish. It's good enough. If you do it good enough, it's good enough, you know. And being so hard, so things like that, you know, I find they help me.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. That's brilliant. And Alan, you referred earlier on to this idea of positive self-analysis, and I wanted to kind of come back and maybe you could explain a little bit more what you mean by that.
Yeah, positive and negative self. We all have a negative voice in our heads, don't we? That can get in our way and stop us from seeing a positive outcome. And it's challenging at times. For some people, it's more challenging, and that's pretty obvious. If you have a mental health problem, it's very easy for that negative voice to kind of darken everything. So I think it's important, and that's where sometimes not everybody needs this situation where they need intervention. They need to go to a counselor, they need to talk to their doctor, and they need to figure that stuff out and do get some help in processing that negative voice and trying to get control of it. But again, it's a bit misconstrued, and it's misconception that people with mental health problems aren't successful in life. I know lots of people who are in high profile positions who have lived and experienced mental health problems and challenges. So the desire and the want for success doesn't wane any difference, but it's just trying to be psychologically able to process that stuff and having a bit of a roadmap to deal with that negative self-analysis. And Wade makes a very good point, and it sounds quite simplistic, but striving for perfection and everything being laid out 100% all the time can drive us crazy, and it can create that's where that negative self-analysis is. So we can practice and learn to view the situation differently and try and have some positive self-analysis. There's always positives there, even in a negative situation. I truly believe that, and I've experienced lots of different challenges even since that kind of moment in 2009. Loads of different challenges and setbacks and sadness, and it's just how you view them a little bit differently. So trying to get hold of that negative that negative voice in our head, ways you can do that is educating yourself, getting your perspective better. I use a positivity wall, so I have lots of positive messages, reminders that I've had to use. I don't, every time I get into the car, I don't have to pull down the visor and look at them to start my day, but I have different reminders and some pictures of happy times and good times and things I did. We all have smartphones. We can give ourselves little reminders to say, you know, something like one step at a time. It sounds so simplistic, but you know, if you have 15 things to do today and you say, listen, I can only do one thing at a time, one step at a time.
Like Martin Luther King said,
yeah,
you don't.
But it gives me. Yeah, go ahead, Wade.
You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step.
Yeah, and it just gives me a sense of calm, and I've practiced that. So it takes a little bit of practice and help. And like I said, there's loads of people that can help there, counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists who help start your roadmap. Sounds daunting sometimes, but what I would say to any of the chefs out there who are stressed, who are under pressure, whose environment is difficult, whether that be domestically or from a working point of view, one step at change, small changes can make a huge difference. And the things that have really helped me is trying to get a little bit of a plan and a structure to my week in a very unstructured world, because I'm a freelancer now in sport and broadcasting. But we all want to be happy and healthy. Nobody wants to carry around mental baggage or negativity. And it's not easy. And like I say, and I reiterate this point, sometimes the reality is the reality. It's tough. But if we can create the tiniest little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, or we'll go towards that, and that light will get bigger and bigger and bigger. It'll close sometimes, but if you've learned how to open it and put your perspective right. So, you know, exercise, nutrition, dare I say it to chefs, nutrition is important. So
that's great. I'm glad you brought it up, because we actually have a question in from Veronica saying, do you find that diet plays a role in mental health?
Absolutely, yeah. If you put bad fuel in the car, it's going to splutter and it's going to break down. I'm a mechanic. I use that analogy. So, of course.
And Wade, chefs can have pretty bad eating habits.
Pretty bad, I would say abysmal, Ruth, to be honest with you. Yeah, I would say abysmal.
You're pickers, aren't you, Wade? Picking pieces.
Yeah, all day long, tasting. And then we'd probably, you know, when I lived in cities and stuff like that, and you'd be finished going home at night, you'd be throwing a kebab down your neck at 12:30 or something before you get into your apartment or anything like that. And we are very, very, very bad when it comes to our diet, and eating well is it's probably it's probably second or third on any list you look up on how to mind your mental health. You will always see eating well and a good diet, you know.
Yeah, and you mentioned that a couple of times, Wade, that whole moment, that time after service, you know, I think it's kind of worth, it's such a pivotal time for chefs, isn't it? That time when you go home after service, or what you do. And like Alan, you're talking about just putting steps in place and doing one thing at a time. I don't know what you think, Wade, but I feel like addressing what you do in that moment is probably like the number one thing for chefs, like rather than going home or going out drinking or going home and smoking a joint or whatever it is that people do to bring themselves down to kind of a level where they can go to
down after service or whatever. Yeah, it is important. And I found that a very, very important thing for me as well. It's coming home. Like I used to come home from service, and you know, there'd be Elaine used to always say, just because you open a bottle of wine doesn't mean you have to drink the whole thing. But like that was it. I'd have a glass of wine or whatever sitting in front of the TV, watch absolute crap on the TV and stuff like that. And yeah, and that whole after service, I can relate a lot to it. And you know, it's kind of wind down. Like I said, I do my pre-sleep and try to get to bed. So I'll come home now, have a cup of tea after service, maybe watch a bit of TV, maybe read something, and then go up to bed, do a bit more reading, and do a little bit of that pre-sleep meditation. And I find it like that, if you do that, it's a good starting point. It's kind of you're ending your day nicely. Even things like, you know, instead of a simple thing, like instead of going home and picking all the really bad things that happened in the day and dwelling on the bad things, start jotting down a gratitude list, like what was good for the day, what went well for you, you know, so you're ending your day on a positive rather than negative thoughts going around in your head. I just found that is something, a little tool that I was told.
And you know, Wade, when you do that stuff, and this time sometimes people feel, God, I have to dissect everything, I have to do all this homework, and it's tiring. I don't want to do that. You don't have to do it all the time.
No.
You just kind of practice it, and my kind of positivity wall, I can turn that on in my head now because I've practiced it. I've kind of got into a process of thinking of my positives, my family, my friends, my child, you know, what's my perspective, and it does help turn that trigger a little bit. So for people who are watching here or maybe see it afterwards, you know, it's just small changing little habits and behaviors can make a difference at the start. Having a conversation with your wife or a friend or someone else in the kitchen to say, I'm worn out. Maybe going to your doctor and just getting a little medical assessment. And then saying, you know what, I'm working 7 days a week in my business. I'm just from now on, I'm actually taking 2 half days or even 2 days off or whatever. Sometimes it can be very difficult, and that I'm going to go and do something nice for myself or my family on that day. So you can still have your night out with your friends or have your few drinks or whatever. You don't have to become a hermit or live, you know, so we know if we drink too much, you know, the following morning is challenging. I always say to people, try and drink when you're in good form. At least the hangover is much better then. If you drink when you're in bad form and there's issues and problems, you're just masking them. They're exasperated the next day. So we did that as rugby players, which is kind of, I have the mentality from that. You know, we play 4 matches and there'll be no alcohol. It's a busy month, and if we get to our end goal and we get to the knockout stages, we're going to have a night out, and you know, it was the best night out ever. And so too much alcohol certainly is an issue. And just remember, exercise, nutrition are important. The exercise piece isn't become a professional triathlon, doing triathlon. It's maybe if the chef comes home at 11 o'clock at night and he can't unwind, maybe it's a case of just go out for 20 minutes for a walk, have a shower, go for a walk for 20 minutes, listen to a bit of music or whatever, because there's lots of nice things there that we don't realize. And if you get a bit of help or with somebody, they can help you put a few little processes in place here, and it can change a lot of things. And like I say, your 12-hour day the next day then is an easy 12-hour day. What is it like? It's you know, and it doesn't mean you go on this perfect path all the time. Sometimes we get knocked off a nice smooth road, and that's what mental health is. It's about getting back onto that smooth path as best we can and creating light at the end of the tunnel and creating compassion for people and understanding that this is a real issue, and it's something that we need to break down the stigma and take away the fear from people taking off the mask. And there's no shame in any of that.
Guys, believe it or not, we're at the end of our time. It's just like I can't believe it's gone so fast. But if I can just ask you really kind of briefly a couple of like final questions, which is, I suppose, the one question I want to ask both of you is just like, if there's one kind of key takeaway for people, you know, if there's one thing that you kind of ask people maybe to do coming away from this, what would it be? And the second thing is really, you know, Wade, I suppose mainly this question is to you, but like as an industry, you know, for the profession of chefs, what do we need to be doing? And you know, how can we create the right kind of support networks and supports for chefs? And I suppose, Alan, I'd ask you maybe, are there some lessons from the world of professional rugby, or just from your experiences of things that have kind of been done well that could help? So maybe Wade, I'll start with you and finish with Alan.
Yeah, I'm going to be fairly boring with the answer for what you just asked there. And you know, when you ask what can we do, and I think exactly what we're doing right now. We're talking, we're putting it out there, and like Alan said, about one step at a time, just baby steps. We're not going to change the world at the moment. We're not, you know, and we're not trying to change the world. We're just trying to get it out there. So I think exactly what we're doing right now is a really good step. Just talking about it, just getting it out there. And even then, as individuals, just talk. It's easy, you know. It's good to talk, like that old ad that used to be on TV. It is good to talk, and as much as.
And wait, could I maybe just, I mean, just in terms of the industry and the chef profession, I suppose, an honest answer to this, do you think it's still hard? Like, do you think, I'm not saying even necessarily stigma, but do you think that it's still a tough kind of conversation to have and a tough thing to
It is, and it's always going to be tough. And that first time talking and the first time spilling, you know, or saying that you're not feeling well, or you're not, you know, something's not right. That's always going to be the hardest step you as an individual can take, and it's going to be the toughest. But what you wouldn't realize, and you don't realize, is once you take that first step, how many other people are feeling like you, or have issues like you, or different. You know, mightn't be the exact same issues, mightn't be, but you will be really shocked and really surprised as to how many other people are out there. And you know, and you won't hear this and you won't find this unless you talk.
Thanks, Wade. Alan, a key takeaway and any kind of advice, I suppose, for the industry.
Yeah. Lots of things I could say here to this, but the one thing that kind of jumps out in my mind is compassion and kindness to yourself and to others. I think it's really important, I mentioned earlier, for people who are healthy and well, and I'm continually trying to spread this message, people who are not struggling or haven't struggled with a mental health problem. You're really important. Your light kind of gives us a lift and gives people around you a lift. Your understanding and your compassion, that if somebody kind of confides in you, you can change someone's life for the better. So compassion and kindness for others. Be careful how you speak to people, and be careful how you speak to yourself. I think Wade mentioned that. Try and speak nicer, even in the tough situations, in a tough reality. Try and be kind to yourself. It makes a big difference. In rugby, you asked what can you do in your industry, in the chef industry and food industry to make a difference? Well, I'll give you an example of what the rugby players have done, and it may not be practical at the moment, but they've set up a campaign, Tackle Your Feelings, with Rugby Players Ireland, that offers access to counsellors and a support network that they can talk to people on a confidential basis and get help and support. The uptake has been phenomenal, which probably doesn't make sense to some people, but here you have lots of sports people in the 4 different provinces, lots of rugby players who are in this really macho environment, physical environment, that the uptake in the access to counsellors and support has been really big. And that tells its own story that, you know, just because you're sports people are in good profile, supposedly happy place, that you're not struggling. So there's been lots of success in that program, and again, trying to create a program where there is access to counsellors or support. Sometimes the biggest fear for people is they think if this gets out there that it's going to be shame, it's going to be weakness. So we do have to have the confidentiality situation where they can start that process with a counsellor or having a conversation. And sometimes it's a couple of chats and they can process it themselves and get back on track. So that's something that we really need to do. The ultimate devastation is suicide, and thankfully we've seen a gradual, and I say gradual very skeptically because we don't know what the figures are going to be for 2020, a gradual decrease in suicides. In my own community and in my own county in Tipperary, there's been a few cases in recent times, and unfortunately that's just the reality we live in. So we want to try and take people back from that ultimate devastation, and no matter how bad it seems, there's help and support and people care. We all have someone who cares and loves us and wants us to get better and can help us. And there's lots of great charities and great people working in the mental health sector. It's not perfect. I could go on for half an hour about, you know, the HSE and when people present at weekends and stuff like that. But there's lots of great help and support out there. Avail of it. Don't be afraid to talk, and create that little bit of light for yourself.
Thank you so much, Alan. And folks, my sincere apologies. I hate to go over time, and we have gone over time. So thank you so much for staying with us. I think that's a great message to end on. Please, if you are, if you're feeling down at all, or if you're suffering from anxiety or any of that, please just take that first step and talk to somebody. If you want to kind of go to, a professional, I suppose, organization that deals with that, we have shared some contacts there. I loved your analogy at the beginning, Alan, about the clouds, and I read a thing somewhere not long ago about, above the dark clouds there's still a blue sky, and I think that's like such an important thing to focus on, and just think the good stuff is still there. You just need to clear those clouds away, and that takes a little bit of work sometimes. So guys, thank you so much. Wade, really appreciate you coming and sharing your own kind of recent experiences. And Alan, you've been a beacon, and I think really important to see someone coming from, the background that you've come from and talking about these things. So thank you both so much. Thank you to BWG for their support.
Pleasure.
And thanks to everyone who joined us. Again, I'm so sorry for going over time. Just to mention, on the 5th of October, we have a webinar coming up, completely different, about food costings, and that's supported by Ballymaloe Foods, but that's about keeping your business healthy. So definitely try to tune into that one as well. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, guys. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.